Hello, to carry on from the first watercolour video that I did, I'm going to do a few more points today. I know some of you found it quite useful, that little introduction for beginners into watercolour. We covered one or two things. We covered the importance really of getting to know your own materials and 3 points regarding the amount of water that we use in watercolour. The first point was the type of paper you chose, the second point was the volume of water that you added to your pigments, and the third point was the type of brush you used and how much water that held. So if you want to watch that video and haven't, it's perhaps best that you watch that one before this one, and I'll pop the link up above. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit more about painting wet in wet. It's something I touched on in that video, and it's something that I do a lot of. I do most of my paintings are wet in wet, and the other watercolour technique is wet on dry, which we can talk about again another day. So I'll get started now and show you some of the techniques I thought we should talk about today. So the first thing we need to do to begin with is to fasten our paper down. When you add water to the paper, it's like when you have an old door in bad weather and it's raining, it will swell. And then when it dries out again, it will contract. So then you can end up with your paper warping, and if it warps whilst you're painting, your paint will flow into those warps, and you can end up with it looking quite a mess. So you need to have your paper nice and flat, so we need to tape it in position until you finish your painting and it's dried. You can buy these pads, different brands, that are gummed all the way around, so you complete your painting, and then there's a little slot here where you can pop a knife down and take that piece of paper off once you've finished, so that's quite handy. If you have a pad that isn't gummed down, one thing I sometimes do is clip it around the edges at the corner. Just pop your clip on like that, and that's going to help to keep your paper in position, or you could tape it. I sometimes tape this part round to the back. Okay, but today we're going to use a sheet of paper. Just put that pad out of the way. So we're going to tape it all the way around. Now, so this is a practice paper, and it's £140 weight, and it's a knot pressed, which we talked about again in the last video. Now when I put the tape down, I get my thumb and I go along the edge of the board there, and then just lightly do that. Now some tapes are stickier than others. This one is particularly sticky actually, that's why I'm not actually pressing down too hard there. I press on the board but not on the piece of paper itself. And I'll talk later about why that's important when you come to finish your work. Now if you have one that you find is too sticky and you're going to risk tearing your paper, one thing that you can do is get your piece of tape now and just put it onto your jeans or whatever clothes you've got on. You see I've picked up a little bit of fluff off my jeans, and that's going to take some of that sticky off, and so it's not going to stick too much to the paper, but just enough to keep it nice and flat while we're working. Okay, so that's all 4 sides. So now when we apply some water and it expands and contracts, that's going to keep it in position until the painting's finished and it's dried. So that's one thing that we need to know as beginners. Okay, so 2 pots of water. I might have mentioned this before, but 1 pot for using the clean water to add to your painting, and the other pot for cleaning your brush, and try and remember which way around you've got them. I'm using 2 brushes today, so both synthetic ones like we talked about before, both round ones. That's a number 4 and that's a number 12. And I'm going to start off just by showing you how easy it is to lift some paint off to make some clouds. So I'm using some cerulean blue. Now, I'm not doing a painting, I'm just showing you a few techniques, so just using this paper in different parts. So I'm just going to imagine we've done a wash of cerulean blue for a nice sky onto the dry paper there. Clean your brush out, and then with a smaller brush I'm going to make some clouds. So while it's still wet, now one way to see how wet your paint is to put your head to one side and see where the light's glistening on it. So while it's still damp, I'm going to take some of that paint off with a brush, and can you see how I'm twisting that brush to make random shapes, and that's just making some cloud shapes. So take that paint off, clean it again, and this is with a damp brush, don't forget, not a wet brush. You're taking the excess off your brush. So it's damp, you're not introducing any more water onto that paper, you're just removing the paint that's there. And you can actually be quite, if it's a good paper, you can be quite rough and, you know, make some good shapes, cloud shapes. And just vary the shapes, twisting your brush. And that makes it look quite like a summer sky where you've just got those little light fluffy clouds. Okay, now depending on the time of day, depends on where the lightest parts of these clouds are. If it's midday and the sun is coming from above, the sun's going to hit the top of the clouds and they're going to have shadows underneath. Sunsets and sunrises are quite different because they might have the sun reflecting underneath. So we're just going to imagine this is midday. We're going to take plenty of paint off the top to make that nice and white on the tops of the clouds, and then we'll put some extra grey underneath, as if we've got a shadow underneath that cloud. So to make a grey, we use some burnt sienna with a little bit of this same blue. Now the important thing here is that it's not so dry that it doesn't move and you don't get those nice soft edges, but if it's too wet it's going to move too much and you're going to make a mess. So it's, again, tilt your head to the side, and if it's not got a sheen then it's probably fine. If it's very glistening, it could be too wet, but a lot of that comes with practice. So just practice on the side somewhere. And then just think, well, I'm going to put some greys underneath my clouds here. And don't forget that these will dry lighter than they go on. So can you see they're bleeding up slightly into the cloud? Just use the tip of your brush and make some random shapes. And it's a little bit dry because I did have to stop the video there to go and change the battery in my camera, so it's a little bit dry. So what you can do is, again, with a damp brush, not a wet brush, a damp brush, take the excess off, just soften those tops of those clouds there, tops of where you put the shade in, and that just makes you've got this gradation then going from your lightest bit on the top down to the base there. I'm just using two colours to make it simple, but of course you can add more colour. You could add some sun on the top as well. A nice grey could be made out of the three primaries. And if once you've got that on you feel, well, actually I would like that one to have a bit more white in the middle there, then you can take it off again. So clouds are something you could play around with all day actually, but don't forget when you've painted them, you know, nobody's going to say, oh, that cloud wasn't just like that, because, you know, they're different all the time and nobody's going to be checking that you've got them completely accurate. And I might just in places put a little bit of a straight bottom on some of them where, you know, you sometimes get those. And this is just with a damp brush. Okay, so can you see how you could build that up and build that up just by taking some out to get your whites back, and by adding extra bits of grey. You might want to go a bit darker in places, and you could just dot a bit more colour in, and that's just going to give you different contrasts in different areas rather than it all being the same. So perhaps to this side it's a bit more in shadow than it is at this side of the painting. Put extra in. Okay, so that's just a bit of a start to doing some wet in wet painting, lifting out and putting extra pigment in. But like I said in the last video, as long as you remember to add extra pigment all the time and not extra water. So don't introduce more water into the painting that you've already done. Now if you want to have a go after you've done that at trying something even more wet in wet, what you can do is make some colours up first. So I've got cerulean, a Windsor blue, a grey made up of the Windsor blue and the light red and some yellow ochre and then the light red. And with this one we put the paint onto dry paper, but then we painted wet in wet with the paint. With this one we're going to go onto a wet paper as well. So wet your whole paper first. See, I've got a little bit of pink left on that brush. And actually, I mean traditionally you would wet the whole paper and not have any dry bits, but if you just do it quite roughly and you have some dry bits, actually that can make some little sparkles of light or some clouds or something as well. So just with this one, just go for it, enjoy yourself, get a big brush, slop some water on and then slop these paints into it. And just think about the way the sky might be going. So start off at the top, we'll think, oh it's coming down this way and in towards you, and just have fun and just stick some colour on there. So that was the Windsor. I put some cerulean in that's going to blend into it. Now they're all a similar strength, they've all got a similar amount of water and pigment in, so they're just going to blend together on the paper. And coming down to, imagine perhaps as the horizon down here, and then at the top bit more of the blue. It's a bit darker, maybe it's turning to night time, evening. So extra blue in the top, some grey in the top, and just wherever. But see how I'm moving my arm in great big sweeps. I'm not being tight, I'm getting my arm moving. And then maybe just a bit of red in the base, perhaps it's evening time like we said. And some of that red's going to reflect up onto the underneath of those clouds under there, so take a bit up there as well. But the thing is not to fiddle too much, to be quite brave, just to go for it. Once you get to the stage where you think, oh yeah, I quite like that, that looks nice, then leave it. Don't start messing around with it too much. And you can, if you like, take some clouds out as well with a bit of tissue. So it's all about having fun, getting plenty of water on that paper, plenty of water in your paint, and just going for it really. See there how I've perhaps done that too much and spoilt it a bit, but like I say, leave it when you're happy with it. I'm just showing you that you can lift some of that out with some paper if you really wanted to. That's made quite a nice cloud up there, using the tissue where it was quite dark with that dark blue. But you know, you can imagine that, a simple sky, and then if you perhaps come in the front foreground, once that's dry, pop a silhouette of a tree in or something, just with some black, that would be quite nice. But you know, or you could do a sea underneath it, make this your horizon and do a similar thing with the sea and keep the same colours so they're reflected in the sea. But it's good fun painting wet in wet, but you've got to just go for it, just be brave, get your arm moving. Can you see how by, I'll just show you, the shape of this brush, if you do it in a slow motion, you're just going to get a boring straight line. When you're sweeping it around, you're going to get these different shapes. There's not much water on there, sorry. You know, where it's going to, you're going to get things like this, where you that use the shape of the brush. I'll do it here. You know, so that's going to make cloudy shapes. Okay, now I'm just going to put some paint all the way down here, next to where that masking tape is, so that I can show you what I was talking about before, once this has dried. It's got a nice big messy piece of paper now, but it doesn't matter because we're just playing and trying things out. Okay, so I'll leave that to dry and then we'll come back and talk about the importance of that, how you take that masking tape off. Okay, so that's nice and dry now, and I'll just show you why we have to be careful taking this masking tape off. So always do it like this, away from your painting. So carefully away from your painting, and you'll end up also with a nice crisp line there, which makes it easier to frame. But now watch what can happen if you take it off towards your painting. Okay, so that is why we always take it off away from your painting. So don't do a lovely painting and then do this. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. I'll come back and do some more tips another day. But just for today, have some fun, get a big piece of paper, nice colours mixed up, some sky colours or some sea colours. Get your arm moving with a great big brush and plenty of water and just enjoy yourself. Make them all the same concentration and just go for it. Okay, so if you've enjoyed this video, let me know what you think down below in the comments. And of course you can subscribe if you want to see more like this. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Bye!